Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Gameweek 9 team selection. The international break has felt extremely long, but FPL is finally back and the deadline is fast approaching. If you are enjoying the content here on my channel, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. But without further ado, let's jump into today's video. So guys, before we jump into the video, this isn't a sponsored section, don't worry. This is just to let you guys know, if you haven't already seen, that I have been nominated as a finalist for the Best in Fantasy Football category at the Football Content Awards for 2022. The event is taking place in November, but the voting closes on the 9th of October. So you've still got over a week left to vote. And like I said, I'm in the Best in Fantasy Football category along with some other brilliant FPL content creators. So absolutely no pressure if you don't want to vote for me, but I would massively appreciate it. So if you've got any value from my content over on Twitter, YouTube, if you've enjoyed the book that I've written on FPL as well, any of the content that I've created, if you've got some value and you'd like to vote for me, I would really appreciate it. But even if you don't vote for me, I would just encourage you to vote anyway, because as content creators, we put in a lot of effort and it's a completely free thing to do. It'll only take you 2 seconds. I'll leave the link in the description. I'll leave the link in the pinned comment. Feel free to go and vote for your favorite and creators, editorial. There are loads of different categories as well. It's not just fantasy football. So I would massively appreciate your vote, but no stress either way. I thought I would just let you guys know and thank you for at least nominating me, because now I'll be able to attend the event and it's just a pretty cool event to attend. And it's a nice bit of validation that the content that I'm creating, you guys do enjoy. So massive thank you for voting for me thus far. If you've not yet voted and you'd like me to win the Best in Fantasy Football, I'll leave the link in the pinned comment and the description. Thank you very much. Let's move into the video. So guys, as always, we're going to go through the team as it currently looks without any transfers having been made. And then after we've looked at the team in its entirety, we'll go through to the transfer plans both for this week and for future weeks as well, and discuss where we might be looking to take the team in future weeks. But as you can imagine, because I wildcarded in Game Week 8, the team's actually very well set up moving forward, and I have been pretty lucky with the international break. There haven't been that many injuries, but we've had injuries to the likes of Patterson, Luca Dean, Isak. So I'm looking at my team now. I might have a couple of issues, but generally speaking, so far at least, my team looks fairly unscathed from the international break, and I'm in a position where I can, if I want to, roll the free transfer. And because I've wildcarded in 8, most of the players that I would want up until the World Cup, or at least for the next few weeks, are already in place for me. So, yes, I always did say that I think a Game Week 9 wildcard was probably slightly better than a Game Week 8 wildcard. But considering I pretty much had to play it in 8, I'm looking at my team and saying, do you know what? I'm pretty well set up. If I were to wildcard this week, yes, I might make 5 or 6 changes, but realistically, there are only 1 or 2 key differences to those teams. So let's go through the team. At the moment, I'm in a 3-4-3. I've got 102 million team value, and I've got 0 million in the bank. So if I do want to make any moves, it has to be a downgrade or equal value, or I need to find some funds. And I am currently ranked at 23k. So again, we've had a very good start to the season. I'm hoping I can kick on and get even lower than that before we go to the World Cup as well. So starting in defence, we do still have the Newcastle double up. We've got Nick Pope and Trippier. I think this is one of the differences I would have on a Game Week 9 wildcard. I don't think I particularly want double Newcastle long term, but the reason that I chose it on wildcard is, of course, the Bournemouth fixture in Game Week 8 was amazing. And like I said, Pope and Trippier in their own right are both fantastic picks. I didn't really like any of the other defenders, and I still think Pope is one of the best keepers in the game, despite being relatively expensive. And the other thing is, Pope, yes, you probably have to play every week, but Trippier, you don't. I've got really decent defenders on my bench, so any weeks that I don't want to play Trippier, I don't have to. So yes, I do have a double up. I don't necessarily think it's optimal moving forward, but I don't necessarily hate it at the moment. And like I said, I don't have to play that double up every single week. I guess the main issue I've got with it this week is I've of course got Mitrovic. A lot of people might have like a Mitrovic and an Andrea starting for them, and you're almost back in against a Newcastle clean sheet, but then also for a Newcastle clean sheet. I guess what I wouldn't mind is a Mitrovic haul, a Trippier maybe goal or assist, and then Nick Pope making loads of saves. I guess that wouldn't be too bad for me. But generally speaking, I don't think you can avoid clashes in FPL. You'll never have it where every single game you never have an attacker against a defender. But of course, that's not ideal. So ideally, I wouldn't have this, but it's not a big issue this week. And I'm perfectly fine moving forward holding those 2 players. And then I've got arguably the 2 best defenders in the game to own at the moment. Starting with Reece James, I think if you're on a wild card, if you're not on a wild card, whatever it may be, I think for future weeks, you're going to want Reece James in your team. I think Chelsea's fixtures are good, not great, but they're decent enough. And I just think under Potter, I think Reece James will play right wing back. But more importantly, I think Potter will shore up that defence as he did at Brighton. And you would argue, I don't even think it's an argument, but you would say that the Chelsea defenders are probably slightly better than the Brighton defenders. So depending how long it takes Potter to get that defensive ship a little bit tighter, I think generally we will see an improvement in Chelsea's underlying data from a defensive perspective. So I think with the attacking threat he has, playing at right wing back because they've signed Fofana, yes, they could switch to a back four. I still think he's very, very attacking at right back. I don't think we'll see much from at centre back now under Potter. And then with the decent fixtures and hopefully Potter improving them, I just think that James is a fantastic asset to own. I think I would still own James even if he was like 7 million. I still think he would be good value. And then the third defender starting this week is Cancelo. I don't think this is the easiest fixture. However, recent news today, I'm recording this late on Thursday evening, ready for a Friday morning release. The news today is that both Martial and Rashford haven't been pictured in training. That's a massive blow for Manchester United. Yes, we have other, I'm a Manchester United fan, by the way. Yes, we have other talented attackers, but to be honest, Rashford is our weapon. Against teams such as City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham, Rashford is always the weapon on the counter-attack, and I think we're going to struggle without that. Yes, we have Alanga. Yes, we have Ronaldo. We have other options there, but I just don't see anyone that's got that blistering pace that Rashford has. And Martial, whenever he plays, looks fantastic. So I think both of those are massive losses to Manchester United. And I could really see a clean sheet now for Manchester City. And regardless, Cancelo's just stepped it up a little bit in recent weeks. He's started to look a little bit more attacking. And I just think I'm never going to bench Cancelo. It doesn't matter what fixture it is. It doesn't matter who is on my bench. We've played that game before. Last season, I know a lot of people benched Cancelo twice for 2 big games, and I think he got a 15-pointer in one. I can't remember the second. I think it was a 12-pointer, and that's just what Cancelo does. If City keep a clean sheet, he's good for bonus, and he can always pop up with an assist or a goal. So I'm happy with the back line this week. Yes, it's not ideal to have a double Newcastle against Fulham when I've got Mitrovic. Yes, I don't think it's necessarily the best fixture for either James or Cancelo, but when I look at it in its entirety, a decent keeper that makes a lot of saves, and then 3 very attacking defenders, I'm perfectly happy with the way the defence is set up. Let's move on to the midfield. Right, let's discuss the midfield. We actually have 4 midfielders, all with home fixtures this week, and a bit of a mixed bag with the actual fixtures. So I'm just going to work from left to right and discuss each of them. And yes, don't worry, we will discuss the potential for Maddison captaincy. So starting with Bowen, I know I got a lot of stick. I mean, a lot of stick on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, everywhere that I post content. I've got a fair amount of stick about the Bowen pick, and I know it was a bit of a gut feeling pick. I'll be honest, I genuinely think his best game of the season was probably game week 8. He created some chances. He had a few chances himself. I actually think he looked slightly better, and I think West Ham looked slightly better. But generally speaking, yes, Bowen's statistics this year are not good. Yes, West Ham have struggled. Yes, it was a bit of a punt, and I'm perfectly happy if it backfired, because I think sometimes in FPL, you've just got to take these punts. And I got quite a bit of stick for Bowen, and I got quite a bit of stick for Maddison. And now this week, everyone wants Maddison. And next week, it could be that everyone wants Bowen. These things happen in FPL. All we need is one Bowen goal, maybe a couple of bonus points, a clean sheet point. He could come away with a 10 or 11 pointer. And all of a sudden, people are saying, should we bring Bowen in? And it's the same thing that's happened with Maddison. Not that many people were considering Maddison. He gets a return last week. He's obviously got Forest this week. Everyone starts talking about him. So yes, I understand not many people pick Bowen. I'm actually fine with that. He remains a differential. And I still think the fact that he's probably on penalties, he's on some corners and set pieces, and he is a fantastic player, as we saw last season. I'm perfectly happy holding Bowen at least for another 2 or 3 weeks. I'm probably going to use Bowen in game week 12 to get Salah. So when West Ham play Liverpool in game week 12, I'm probably going to do Bowen and Kane to a striker and Salah. So I'll probably own Bowen for 9, 10, 11, and then probably move him on in 12. So he's got 3 more weeks to try and do something for me. I'm happy holding him. And I think Wolves at home, whilst Wolves have been a pretty decent defence, I still think that's a decent enough fixture for Bowen. Moving on to Foden. Again, Foden this week, if I do sell a player this week, if I make a transfer, it probably would be Foden. But again, I just think Manchester United losing 2 of their key attackers. Also, Man City are just absolutely fantastic. It's at the Etihad as well. I think this could still be a really decent fixture for Foden. I expect him to start. He starts pretty much every Premier League game anyway. In fact, he has started every Premier League game this season. He starts all of the big games for City. So I'm not particularly worried about whether he'll start. Having said that, I bet he gets benched now. I'm not particularly worried about minutes. And I just think I don't really back any other players that I would want to bring in this week to outscore Foden. The only player that I'm tempted by is Zaha, because I'm going to want Zaha from sort of game week 10, 11 onwards anyway. But I just think I don't need to do that this week. Again, anything could happen this week. I do not back Zaha to outscore Foden. I do think it could happen, absolutely, especially because he's on penalties. But I don't back that enough to have to make the move this week. I would rather another week of information, 2 free transfers next week, and then I can do Zaha plus something else if I want to. So for now, I think Foden's going to stay, but that Foden spot there is probably going to be moved to Zaha either in game week 10 or in game week 11. I haven't fully decided that yet. Moving on to Martinelli. If I run a wildcard in game week 9, I probably would sell Martinelli. I know a lot of people are talking about having so much money tied up in him. Realistically, you've got 0.3 million tied up in him if you bought him at the start. There's a chance he gets a price drop. at some point if he doesn't perform over the next 2 tricky games against Tottenham and Liverpool. So I do genuinely believe that there's a small chance you're probably only losing 0.2, maximum 0.3 million on a Martinelli. Yes, that is a fair amount, but I don't think it's like game changing. And I think if you think you can get someone in that Martinelli spot that will outscore him by maybe 10 to 15 points, if you think you can get someone in that's going to haul in one of the next 2 or 3 games and you don't think Martinelli will get much, I do think you could potentially get ahead of the curve there. I suppose my issue is, again, I'm not sure that I truly back anyone to outscore him by that level. I do think like someone like a Harvey Barnes or a Paqueta could be a really exciting punt, or a Sinistera I think could be a decent option. But again, I don't back that enough to use a transfer to take out Martinelli, especially when in and around the tricky fixtures and the blank, they've got some really nice ones. So I think it's Leeds in game week 11, I think. And then in game week 13 onwards, they've got like Southampton, Nottingham Forest. So if you can get away with playing him in the tricky ones or benching him and then benching him in the blank, the fixtures in and around that are still really good for Martinelli. And Smith Rowe looks like he's got a relatively long-term injury. So Martinelli's minutes should be fairly nailed. I think he's still a good option. And I just don't back anyone confidently enough to move Martinelli to them at the moment. But let me know down below what you're currently planning on doing with Martinelli. And then the fourth and final one, like I said, the player that everyone suddenly wants this week is Maddison. Now, I think a lot of people were looking at him anyway, due to the fixtures that they've got. Nottingham Forest and Bournemouth in the next 2 are so good. But I think it did just help people a little bit. It just gave him a little nudge, the fact that he did return last week against Spurs. So I think Maddison's probably going to be high in demand. He's the man on the thumbnail. Everyone's going to be looking at getting him in. If you are asking, should you bring Maddison in? I do genuinely think Maddison should be priority transfer this week. Should you captain Maddison? I think that's the big decision to make. Listen, it's probably not for me. The reason I say that is when I'm looking to captain against someone that is so heavily captained, for example, like Salah last season, Haaland this season, I need to be fully convinced by the alternative option to back against the heavily captained option. Yes, that's a bit of a boring way to play FPL. Yes, it's probably not the optimal way to play FPL. I think you should captain the player you think will score the most points. But I guess in my head, I'm thinking, am I confident that Maddison outscores Haaland? Absolutely not. In no world am I confident of that. If I'm not confident, do I need to take that risk? Especially at 23k, do I need to take a risk with captaincy when the rest of my team is littered with differentials like Bowen, Foden, Trippier, James Cancelo's probably not, but in combination they are. Maddison in and of himself is a differential. And when we look at my front line, I do have Harry Kane, who's a bit of a differential again. So yes, I don't have like that many risky picks, but in combination, when I've got 4 or 5 relatively low-end players, I could easily rise massively up the ranks just by having those players. I don't feel like I need to take on an extra risk this week. And when Haaland is in absolutely ridiculous form, when he's playing so well, when City looks so good, I'm going to need to be really convinced by the alternative option. And I'll just give you an example of that. In game week 11, Harry Kane plays against Everton at home. And of course, City play against Liverpool. So in game week 11, I would feel fairly comfortable captaining Kane. That's because Kane's data is absolutely excellent. Spurs are a better attack than Leicester, and also Kane's on penalties. And Kane has delivered consistently across multiple seasons. For me, I'm confident enough there that I genuinely believe Kane will outscore Haaland in that week. Therefore, I'm happy taking a risk that week. In this week here, yes, it's an absolutely plum fixture for Maddison. It's perfect. Nottingham Forest at home. Yes, he looked very good in game week 8. And yes, I would expect the Leicester attack to improve. It's a lot of ifs, buts, and maybes, and I haven't quite seen enough from both Maddison and Leicester yet to captain him on top of just owning him. And let me tell you, even if loads of people bring him in, it will still be a relative differential around the top ranks. I guarantee it. There's not enough managers that will bring him in this week that it will suddenly be owned by absolutely everyone. So that's my opinion on it. Let me know down below if you're considering it. He'll probably have my Vice armband, and if I were like really lowly ranked, or if I was playing FPL purely just for having a bit of fun and I wasn't creating content and I was just doing whatever I wanted, maybe I would captain Maddison. But for me, I just don't see this. The risk reward isn't there for me. I just think it's safer, better, optimal, the better decision to captain Haaland. And if Maddison still hauls, I would still absolutely love that. If Maddison gets a 30-pointer, I'm not going to sit there and think, oh, I wish I'd captain Maddison. I'm going to sit there and think, yeah, give me all of those points. That's fantastic. Whereas I know if I captain Maddison and Haaland gets like a hat-trick and Maddison blanks, that's going to ruin my weekend. It's going to make me feel terrible. I'm not going to want to put a YouTube video out. So for me, it's just not worth the risk there. It might not be for the right reasons, but there it is. There's my explanation for it. Like I said, do let me know down below if you're planning on captaining Maddison. Let's move on to the attack and the bench as well. So moving on to the attack, we've start with Harry Kane, as we discussed in the previous section. The reason I've got Kane is because I wildcarded last week, and I thought he was a really good option in Game Week 8. And also, I think he's a fantastic captaincy option in Game Week 11. Yes, there's I don't even think there's a temptation, but yes, there's the option for me, if I want to switch to Salah. A lot of people this week are talking about that this is the perfect fixture for Salah. A Potterless Brighton at home. He's looked really good in the international break. This is prime like Salah hat-trick territory. It could absolutely be so. I probably would captain Salah if I owned him. So maybe it might be worth it, but it would require 2 transfers to do it. I would be taking out Kane and Foden for a -4 to then captain against Haaland and bring in Salah. It could work out. I just don't necessarily think that's the best play for me this week. I think that's maybe just fear of missing out of Salah's haul. I don't think that's necessarily the sensible decision. And again, when I look at captaincy in Game Week 11, I'm not going to want to captain Haaland or Salah. They play against each other, whereas I think Kane's a fantastic captaincy option. So yes, I think Salah's maybe the best captaincy in 9. Kane's probably the best in 11. I already own Kane. I think Foden's a perfect switch to Zaha in 10 or 11. I'm going to continue with the plan that I had on my Game Week 8 wildcard, and I'm perfectly happy holding Kane. And it does mean that I do go without Salah, unfortunately. Of course, I've got the armband on Haaland, like I said. Yes, it's not a perfect fixture, and yes, I could see this being sort of like 1-1, 2-1 to City. I'm not necessarily saying Manchester United have got a great chance, but we do have a history in these sorts of games of just going really, really tight in defence and making it difficult for the opposition. So there's a small chance that Haaland only gets maybe 1 return. Again, I just don't back anyone else massively enough to take the risk to go against him. And then the third striker and the final player in the starting 11 is Mitrovic. There have been slight rumours that he picked up a knock. There was a video of him having an ice pack on his ankle. Let's wait for the press conferences. I think he'll be fine. If he's not fine, I, of course, have the option to go to someone else, or I could just start someone from my bench. I'll discuss that on the deadline stream on Saturday morning. So if we do get news that Mitrovic is out, I'll discuss that on Saturday morning. But as far as I'm concerned, it looks like he should be fine for Game Week 9. So that's the starting 11. On the bench, we do have Everson. Now, this is an interesting one. There's a reasonable chance, I'd say like a 50-50 chance that I start Everson this week, in case he does take the number 1 shirt off of Ward. Now, I don't think that will happen. I'm pretty sure Ward will continue to start in goal for Rodgers. But I guess if he doesn't, then Pope comes in. And if he does, I genuinely think, and I know this will get loads of negative comments, I genuinely think I would prefer this week a Leicester defender, or a Leicester keeper in this case, against Forest at home than I would Pope against Fulham, especially when I'm backing Mitrovic. If Mitrovic is injured, then maybe I wouldn't. I'd probably keep Pope and Trippier and assume that a clean sheet's relatively likely. But if Mitrovic is fine, I think I might just start Everson. And like I said, if he doesn't play, Pope comes in. And if he does play, you've got to think there's a decent chance for a clean sheet there, however bad Leicester have been. If Everson comes back in, you would expect that to actually make their defence slightly better. The rest of the bench is decent enough. I've got Salisu against Everton at home, first sub. I think he's a perfectly good shout this week. I could easily start him ahead of someone else. I just think that the rest of my defence is so attacking. Yes, it would maybe avoid me having a double up on the Newcastle defence, but I just think Trippier is so attacking. He's on corners. His set-piece play is fantastic. He's so attacking from open play too. I just think I would back Trippier to get an attacking return, maybe even more so than the Southampton clean sheet. We've got Andreas, second sub, who every single week, listen, Andreas is a fine option. But again, when I've got double Newcastle defence, I don't want to then have double Fulham attack. I feel like I'm just backing, like, I'm basically probably going to have at least 2 players blanking if I do that. So I probably won't be starting Andreas regardless of what happens. And then the third and final sub is Mark Gehi, a Crystal Palace defender. Like I said, Crystal Palace from Game Week 10 have got remarkably good fixtures up until the World Cup. And last season, Palace was so good defensively. I'm expecting their defensive data to improve again with the nicer fixtures, and I'm perfectly happy holding him moving forward. So that's the team. There we go. Like I said, 102 million, 0 in the bank, 1 free transfer. I don't plan on using the transfer this week, really, unless I have any injury news in the press conferences that forces my hand, or unless I maybe want to just go for Zaha 1 week early. But like I said, I think Foden's perfectly fine this week. Next week, he's also got Southampton at home. So it might even be until Game Week 11 that I potentially move for Zaha. But that's the team. Let me know down below what you think of it. Feel free to give it a rating out of 10. Let's now move on to my transfer plans for maybe this week, but also for future weeks as well. So guys, as always, at the end of these videos, I'm using the My Team feature over at Fantasy Football Hub. There is a link in the description just below the FCA's link for the Football Content Awards. There's a link for 30% off at Fantasy Football Hub. So if you do want access to all of the statistics that I use in all of my videos, and also this fantastic My Team feature, you can get access to that for as little as £2.10 per month using the link in the description. Like I said, I just wanted to just show you maybe where my future transfer plans lie. I'm not going to go too far into the distance, but just to give you a general idea of what I'm currently thinking with my team. So like I said, this week, unlikely to make a transfer. That's not definite. We'll see what happens in the press conferences and how I feel on Saturday morning on the deadline stream. But generally speaking, I'm probably going to roll a transfer this week, which means I go into Game Week 10. Yes, I have nothing in the bank, but I do have 2 free transfers. And this is when I have the option, if I want to maybe play around with it, and maybe if I want to bring in Zaha this week. I guess the thing that would put me off bringing in Zaha this week is I do have Foden against Southampton at home. Yes, Zaha has Leeds at home, and it's a fantastic fixture as well. Foden versus Southampton at home or Zaha versus Leeds at home. That's a very tricky one, to be honest. Actually, Foden has got much higher projected points according to the Fantasy Football Hub algorithm. So I'll have 2 free transfers, but there's a reasonable chance, I suppose, that I don't want to make the Foden to Zaha move. If that is the case, I suppose I've got the tricky decision of what do I then do with my 2 free transfers, right? Because I don't want to take out Mitrovic because he's got Bournemouth the week after. I'm not going to take out Kane or Haaland. I don't want to take out Bowen because he's got Fulham and Southampton. I don't want to take out Maddison. He's against Bournemouth. If I'm not going to take out any of my City players, James against Wolves, Trippier and Pope against Brentford. So the starting 11 is absolutely fine. Like you can see 70.1 predicted points. I don't really need to touch it, to be honest. And when I look at the bench, the reason I've got Salisu, I know it seemed like a strange pick, is in game week 12, he's got Bournemouth at home. And remember, City and Arsenal blank in 12. I just think that's a really nice fixture to have him to play in game week 12 when I'm going to want to bench 3 players from City and Arsenal. So I don't want to take Salisu out. I don't want to take out Andreas because I think he's just fine as a bench option most weeks. And again, I can play him against Aston Villa in game week 12. And Gehi, I don't particularly want to take out either. So I suppose there's a chance that I don't want to play Martinelli. So if that is the case, I could bring in Gehi and play a 4-3-3. But to be honest, I think I would probably play Martinelli against Liverpool and just hope that there's a lot of goals in that game. Again, I don't have any Liverpool defenders, so I don't mind if Martinelli scores there. So I suppose the issue comes if I'm not using a transfer in game week 9, and maybe I'm keeping Foden for game week 10. Well, what on earth do I do with my 2 free transfers? The thing is, FPL will always throw a curveball at you. Like maybe like Bowen will be rested in game week 9, and all of a sudden I'll be saying, well, he's not nailed, he's not been performing. Maybe I'll switch Bowen, or maybe something will happen. Maybe Mitrovic is out. Like there are so many things that could happen all throughout game week 9 and in the remaining days of sort of the international break going into the press conferences. So I'm saying that I've got nothing to do now, but I'm sure something will happen as it always does in FPL. But generally speaking, the team's looking absolutely fine. If we move forward to game week 11, let's say that I haven't made the Foden switch yet. This is the week that I would do Foden to Zaha, right? Because Foden's got Liverpool, Zaha plays against Leicester. So let's say this is the week that I do Foden to Zaha. Let's assume that I've got 2 free transfers, though. I would have a second transfer if I wanted to switch someone out. Now, I've got some sort of trickier decision to make because I could potentially take out Trippier. The reason I wouldn't maybe want to do that is, again, in game week 12, he plays against Everton. And then after he's got 14, he's got Villa, then Southampton. And then I think it's maybe Bournemouth in game week 16. So they're really nice fixtures. It's not Bournemouth. It's a relatively easy fixture in 16, I believe, for Newcastle. So they've got really decent fixtures. I don't think I want to take him out just because he plays against United. And I can either play Salisu or I can play Gehi. I would probably just about lean towards Salisu for the home fixture. So I don't need to play Trippier that week. And then the rest of my attackers, again, I'm keeping them for obvious reasons. Kane would get the captaincy armband here this week. I've got Martinelli against Leeds, if I haven't sold him by this point. Bowen against Southampton. I've got Maddison and Zaha against each other, but again, I think that's fine for this week. Kane, captain against Everton. Mitrovic against Bournemouth. The team is super, super strong. I don't think I would necessarily want to make any transfers this week apart from Foden to Zaha. Going forward to game week 12, I can just show you if we just optimize the team for this week. Fantasy Football Hub will do its thing. Took my time. That's my internet. Moving forward to game week 12, you can see that actually pushes me up to a 100% team rating over the next 5 weeks. 77% for a week where I'm benching Cancelo, Martinelli, and Haaland. That's pretty decent, right? And the team's looking really good. And remember, if you haven't yet seen, this has been the plan for a while. I'm going to probably do Bowen to Salah. So I'll just show you what that looked like, because Salah will come in for the armband. Give Salah the armband. And then that means just to afford that, I have to take Kane out at this point. It's not necessarily ideal because after that, Kane has Newcastle and then Bournemouth. But I just think with Salah having West Ham, Nottingham Forest and Leeds, assuming Salah is fit and firing at this point and he looks good, and again, it will be dependent on that. If Kane looks really good and Salah doesn't look at it, maybe I'll just keep and captain Kane. But assuming Salah does look decent over the next few, I'd then have up to 7.4 million to take out Kane for someone else. So it could be like a Callum Wilson. It could be a Tony. It could be a Solanke. It could be pretty much any striker up to 7.4. And then I'm up at 87% despite benching Cancelo, Martinelli and Haaland. So the team is in really good shape. I don't need many transfers over the next 3 or 4 weeks. In fact, the only transfer that I really want to make is Foden to Zaha in game week 10/game week 11, which I will discuss in future weeks. Outside of that, the team's looking really good. Let me know down below any of the dilemmas you have with your team. Let me know what you think of my plans as well. Always interested to hear your thoughts. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 9 team selection. Do let me know down below, like I said, what you think of my team. And just one final reminder, please do consider voting for me at the Football Content Awards. If you finish watching this video and you've got value with it and you've got value with the content throughout the season as well, it only takes 2 seconds to vote and I would really appreciate it. Like I said, there will be a link in the description and I'll also try to remember to put a link in the pinned comment as well. Until next time, guys, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.